Hi, I'm Paul from Sony. What we're going to look at in this very quick presentation are the lenses that are used on both the alpha cameras and also on the NEX cameras. The reason being, these lenses can be changeable. So the lens that you have on the alpha, or indeed if you buy something like a 50 to 200 millimeter lens and you want to sort of use it on your NEX camera, it's perfectly acceptable to do so. Let's take a quick look at how this is done. So before we actually remove the lenses from the cameras to switch them over, a quick bit of lens housekeeping. To remove the lenses on the NEX, there's a little button down here which you press. On the alpha range of cameras, there's a button across here to the left-hand side of the lenses which you also press. Pressing and twisting the lenses will actually remove them from their holding. Before we do this though, bear in mind that when you actually remove lenses, it's best to keep the camera and the lens facing down, because a lot of dust is in the air and you don't want to hold the camera upwards and have dust fall into the camera cavity and rest on the actual camera plate. So if we start with the NEX and I show you how to remove the lens. You may have received with your lens a cap. This is always a good thing to have when you take a lens off, because we can put this onto the back of the lens to protect it from, again, any dust when you sit the lens on a surface. Picking up the camera, pressing the lens release button down here, and then we turn, as I said, try and keep the camera facing down a bit, turn the lens in an anti-clockwise direction. The lens will then release. As I said, keep things facing down, and if you have the little cap that I've alluded to, place that on in order to protect the lens from any dust. The camera we have sitting down so that, again, dust is not going to get into the cavity area. Now, in order to use alpha lenses in the NEX camera, we need to use a converter, and this is called an EA1. What this effectively is just a very small interim lens. And effectively what this allows us to do is to mount alpha lenses onto the NEX using this little converter. To place this onto the camera is exactly the same as you would a normal lens. You find the white dot that indicates the reference area, turn the camera over, align the white dots, and twist in a clockwise direction to connect it. We now have the E-mount EA1 converter that allows alpha lenses to be placed onto the NEX. Now, another little tip for when you're doing this is, if you're going to be using a large lens, a large alpha lens on your alpha, for example, we have here a 200 millimeter or 50 to 200 meter zoom lens. It's quite a heavy lens, and you're going to be sort of applying quite a fair amount of weight, additional weight, onto this camera. If you're going to be using it on a tripod, even though it has the tripod hole for you to mount the camera, you're still going to have a sort of a fairly hefty lens putting onto your NEX. So with the EA1 comes a little lens mounting bracket. Very clever little device this, and to install it you simply turn the camera over, slip the connector in, and twist the bar. So now what you actually have is some additional help when using a tripod to place larger lenses, heavier lenses, onto the lens mount area as opposed to directly onto the NEX. You don't have to have it, entirely optional, but it's quite a good tip in order to put it on so that you can balance the weight of the camera and the lens when you're using them. And so finally, let's now mount the 50 to 200 millimeter zoom lens onto the NEX. Again, as similar as we have done when we took the original NEX lens off. We've got our lens, our new lens, which actually has the holders, the protectors, as we have on the NEX camera as well. Let's sort of twist this off in an anti-clockwise direction. Let's twist off the lens protector on the 50 to 200. Remove the lens protector, line up in this case, the two orange dots, twist in a clockwise direction, and we now have a 50 to 200 millimeter zoom lens mounted on our NEX. The zoom lens coming from the Alpha camera. And as I mentioned, you have the tripod bracket here, which you can use instead of using the tripod holder here, because if you place this on a tripod, you're going to have an awful lot of forward weight, which might overbalance your tripod. So this one here allows you to balance it out centrally. And that is placing Alpha lenses onto the NEX. Very simple indeed.